Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Kathy looked spellbound at her reflection in the mirror. In its mysterious depths was reflected a girl of fabulous beauty, as if descended from the paintings of the old masters. Delicate porcelain skin, huge blue eyes surrounded by lancet lashes that never knew makeup, puffy pink lips, perfectly shaped, high breasts, thin waist, and a cloud of snow-white lace. How she dreamed of having it all in her wedding dress, a princess-worthy veil, a modest-looking string of natural pearls, and a ring any girl's dream, no matter how independent they might pretend to be nonsense. Any of us sleeps and sees how that same handsome prince gets on his knee, gently puts the ring on her slender finger. In fact, she had no idea how much such a diamond ring could cost, for she had never worn such jewelry before. And Michael could afford such a fancy ring and so much more. What's more, he could afford anything. For example, such a bliss to choose her Kathy, the most ordinary girl from a simple family with extremely average income, out of hundreds of much better options. Surely such cheaters were frowned upon in his inner circle. But Michael, with his millions, didn't give a damn about any opinion but his own. He took what he wanted without regard for obstacles, much less anyone else's opinions. That's how he wanted Kathy. And he got her. Though he was neither beautiful nor a prince, Kathy took another close look at herself in the mirror and imagined the formidable figure of Michael, balding, and perhaps the overly obese 40-year-old man looked even older than his years. But that didn't matter now. But what strength and power reigned from him. What strength and security was his arm. No, he wasn't a prince. He was a true king. And the title had not come to him at the negotiating table. Kathy adjusted her veil, admiring her own reflection. She thought about it, remembering from the beginning the history of her acquaintance with this strange and even frightening man. She didn't want to go to the restaurant with the girls, but her friend said she would be very offended if Kathy didn't go out to celebrate her birthday right away. 20 years is a big date. How can you not have a party? I booked a stripper. Can you imagine? Molly's classmate and friend Kathy chattered with eyes burning with excitement. Molly, why do you need a stripper? Kathy laughed, coming up with some sort of convincing reason to say no. She didn't like that kind of entertainment. Restaurants were definitely out of her price range. And as for the striptease, it was embarrassing. Ethan wouldn't approve. What do you know? Laughed Molly. Tell me where else to look at handsome men in the movies and at striptease. No, she didn't. Kathy waved it off. But then a third friend joined in. It's good for you. You have Ethan. She declared with obvious envy. You've got a great guy. At least let the others look at other people's faces. Or call yours and tell him to take a leave of absence and dance for us. Oh no, Kathy laughed and gave up after all. What has she got to lose? She'll sit down to eat deliciously and leave quietly, and she doesn't have to look at other people's men. Let Molly fool around as she has extra money. Molly was indeed the daughter of well-to-do parents. Kathy had borrowed money from her more than once. If she didn't have enough to reach her scholarship, she was too shy to ask her parents. They had very little income. They didn't have enough themselves. They offered, of course, and more than once. But Kathy stood her ground. She had enough money. She found a part-time job. That it was a penny-pinching part-time job. She did not say, of course. So you're coming with us, Molly clarified, backing her into a corner. Okay, I'm coming. Kathy waved her hand. Do you want me to give you that blue dress? Molly pleased. Kathy hesitated. Molly, indeed, had a delightful dress, a striking shade that suited her eyes. True, it was short and had a rather revealing cleavage, but it was her birthday, and she won't even dance. She'll just sit at the table. Okay, she gave in, and her friend shrieked with delight, and started kissing Kathy on both cheeks. The closer the evening got, the less Kathy felt. I wanted to go to the restaurant. A feeling of foreboding was keeping her awake. Besides, she didn't tell Ethan where she was going. She had just written that it was a birthday party for a classmate. But time was ticking away at the appointed hour, so Kathy, giving up on her doubts, put on the very dress, heeled shoes. She added a silver chain and was surprised at how beautiful she looked to herself at that moment. Spinning around the room, Kathy was dreaming. She wished Ethan could see her like this, but she was smart enough to know he was going to ask her if it was a bachelorette party, if the cleavage on the dress was too revealing, etc., etc. I'm not going to tell anyone. Suddenly the girl was offended. When she becomes a husband, then let him tell me what to wear, and then I'll think about whether or not I should listen. I'm a free man. And with her head held high, she went to the restaurant, having spent money on a cab. In the car, she had to cover her knees, her purse, so that the driver would look more at the road, not be distracted by her legs. They looked seductively out from under the short. The girl's hem. Leave the number. The hot Mexican couldn't take it, taking her to her destination. I'll fly to the moon and back, just ask. Laughing, Kathy paid and got out of the car. The girls were already waiting outside. In addition to them, 2 more girls who didn't know Kathy had joined them. Apparently Molly friends from another department. The merry flock made their way into the hall, where the head waiter ushered them into a cozy corner separated from the rest of the group. The girls sat down on the comfortable sofas, stretched their legs with pleasure, and talked excitedly, exchanging impressions. Molly looked simply beautiful in her new tight-fitting dress, which emphasized her great figure. She felt at home here. Going to restaurants was a regular thing for her, winningly looking around at the girls and accepting gifts and congratulations. Molly ordered for everyone, cautiously sipping wine from a tall glass. Kathy finally allowed herself to relax and enjoy the delightful bouquet of expensive drink, pleasant music, the overall chic atmosphere. I wish we could spend every evening like this, she dreamed, or at least every weekend. She imagined walking into the restaurant with Ethan dressed in a fancy suit. How that arrogant waiter bows to them, choosing the best seats. Too bad it's just a dream. When Ethan serves his time back home, gets a good money job, then there will be restaurants, and everything will be fine. In the meantime, we have to wait. So she waits. There's not much left. Ethan will be back in the spring. Maybe he'll propose, because that's the way things are going. He hinted at it when Kathy came to him for her swearing in. And now every time they call each other, he calls her nothing but his darling and sweetheart. Kathy, what are you dreaming about? Molly called her. You do not eat anything. Try it. It's delicious, very good. Kathy, struggling to come back to reality, nodded and poked something incredibly tasty on her fork. Everyone stay where you are. This is the police. There was a sudden, authoritative voice, and she almost choked. A real cop from an action movie was standing in front of them, playing with his handcuffs. A tall blonde man in a perfectly fitting uniform glanced around them and abruptly tossed his cap in Molly's lap. The girl shrieked and clapped her hands. It's not a real cop, it's a stripper, Kathy guessed. Confirming her guess, the cop began unbuttoning his uniform. The holster flew to the floor following his cap. The guy moved gracefully to the music, gradually exposing his beautifully built body. Get out of here, a voice bellowed, and 2 men with the appearance of typical bandits piled into their corner, which had ceased to be cozy. Looking at the frightened girls, and you don't have to pay, we'll give you the money ourselves. This was followed by an insult, not to be here. The unfortunate stripper, having received a heavy kick, picked up his props and disappeared. I'm glad I got off cheap. The men, considering the matter resolved, sat down at their table, making the girls snuggle up to each other. What are we celebrating? One of them asked. It's my birthday. Molly was shy and spoke up. Molly, who nodded approvingly, his cynical gaze flashed across her face. It's a party. So it's good. We pay from here. Only it's not booze. It sucks. Hey, get some whiskey. This was directed at the terrified waiters. They brought out a couple of full glasses right away and made the table full of hors d'oeuvres. Why were the girls so quiet? The second winked, and pinched the girl closest to him on the breast. She blushed. The man laughed. "Well, let's drink to the birthday girl," the one with the gold teeth suggested. The waiter obeyed the order and quickly poured the rest of the whiskey over the glasses. "I do not drink," Kathy spoke up. She was very frightened. She was frightened, but her insides were seething with resentment and anger at having spoiled the party. Brave as she was, Goldtooth marveled. "A girl with a temperament I like such nothing to drink with us." He put the glass to his lips. She pressed her lips together and shook her head. "Drink, says who?" The bandit barked, pulling out his gun. The girl screamed, trembling with fear. "I will not." Kathy was possessed like a demon. "What's the matter with you? This isn't the Great Depression, and she's not a weak girl to be told what to do by some jerk. Leave the girl alone." There was a quiet voice. Kathy didn't even notice when two other broad-shouldered men appeared nearby. They reeked of strength and the assurance of obedience. "Yes, fuck you." The gold-toothed man began to sound important, but the other man leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Kathy only heard the name Michael. The bandit changed his face, cursed through his teeth, and he put his weapon away, nodded to his partner, and both of them quickly got up and out of sight. "You can continue to have fun. You won't be disturbed, will you?" one of the men said calmly. But the party had already been ruined. They went home without making eye contact. Kathy wanted to cry and was glad that Ethan would never know. The girl was making her way toward the exit, passing between the tables when she was blocked. Looking up, Kathy recognized one of the saviors. "Dear young lady," the man said, "I have been authorized to give you an invitation from a very respectable man who believes that it is not just a duty to make amends for the offense you have suffered from a rabble that has no place in a decent restaurant. Thank you. I'm fine. You don't have to make it up to me. Can I just go home?" Kathy, she looked around. Her friends, however, had already left. She felt trapped, though the man barely touched her arm. He must have given someone a sign and received an answer, for he smiled and continued, "At least let me make sure you got home safely." Without letting her object, the man said something quietly to the waiter and led Kathy to the exit. The cab appeared in an instant, as if by magic, and a minute later a breathless waiter handed an astonished Kathy a huge bouquet of flowers. The bewildered girl accepted it, and a very focused and clearly frightened cab driver drove her home without taking a penny. Kathy thought she saw a black car pull up next to her house and immediately leave in the parking lot of the restaurant. Or maybe it was just her imagination. It wasn't until she entered her apartment, closed the door, and leaned back against it to calm her racing heart. Kathy calmed down a little, put the flowers in a vase, involuntarily admiring the beauty of the luxurious bouquet. And then the cell phone rang. Kathy almost jumped, but answered it. When she saw the number, it was Molly. "Kathy, where did you go? You were following us." "We were worried." There was genuine excitement in Molly's voice. Kathy felt guilty. Of course she should have said it was all right. "Sorry, Molly, I was distracted." The man who stood up for us. He walked me out and gave me flowers. He gave me an apology from a serious man. Kathy said, looking thoughtfully at the bouquet from someone. Molly's voice rang with excitement. "I heard the bandit say about Michael. It turns out that his bodyguards interceded for us. Can you imagine?" "Who's that?" Kathy seemed to think that Molly even choked on the stupidity of her question. "Kathy, what are you doing?" "Well, Michael is the boss of the city. In fact, he owns everything here. And that restaurant, too." Molly was just bursting with excitement. Apparently, the girl had already recovered from her fright. She must have thought what had happened was an interesting adventure. "Wait, you say you passed the flowers, and the apology is interesting. Why is this for you?" "Actually, it was my birthday." She sounded jealous of her friend's voice. "Oh, Molly, how she likes to be first in everything, doesn't she? I bet it was for all of us." She assured her friend, "I'll bring you the bouquet tomorrow, and you can have it. I will have one, Molly laughed. I phoned my parents. They organize a family dinner is not as fun striptease, but there will be presents and flowers for sure. Good for you again, happy birthday. Kathy put the cell phone down and went to make coffee. Looking at the rising foam in the cup, she went over the events of tonight in her memory. And with each passing minute, she became more and more anxious. She had to get mixed up in that story with the bandits. They were all bandits, and Michael might be a bigger one too. What bad timing was all this? To console herself, Kathy wrote Ethan, I love you. Good night. Let him read it and smile. I wish these 2 months would fly by. Ethan will be back, and everything will fall into place. No one would have to be afraid of anyone. Everything would change at once. Perhaps even a last-name coffee and a good book spent the evening with the girl. So gradually she forgot about the unsuccessful trip to the restaurant after all. Well did this very Michael. A beautiful gesture sent his bodyguards to deal with the bandits, showed them who was in charge. So that would be the end of it. She was wrong. It didn't end, because in the morning the driver of a foreign car of the most bandit type called her out in the driveway. Kathy, good morning. Have you been asked to take you to class and wherever you need to go? It's a gift from Michael. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, Kathy. John introduced himself to the driver. So John continued, please tell your Michael that I appreciate his care, but I don't need it at all. I am fine. No one is going to harass me. Kathy. John shook his head with the smile with which adults look at silly children. Understand 2 simple things. 1, you can't know for certain that the bandits of yesterday won't want revenge on one of you for humiliation, and in public. And 2, my master's gifts are not to be refused. It was said with a tone that made Kathy flinch. What a mess. And she believed the story was over. She should not have gone to that restaurant. How did she feel about it? Kathy was not stupid. So with her head held high, she stepped into the car. Well, I'm really in a hurry to get to the institute. I would be grateful if you could give me a lift, in the tone of a queen, she said. John, who was carefully waiting for her reaction, even whistled admiringly and raised his thumb. However, he behaved impeccably. He didn't try to talk or flirt along the way. And he drove me to the institute very quickly. What time do classes end? He asked. When Kathy got out of the car. I'll pick up at 4 p.m. Kathy answered quickly, figuring she could get away from the obtrusive service much sooner. Don't do anything stupid. I wouldn't advise it. John warned her, as if reading her mind as friendly advice. Something made Kathy's heart flinch, though he said it calmly, without threat. Studying wasn't going through her head during her classes. She kept glancing up and down at her watch, so the teacher even admonished her. And the attentive Molly wrote, why are you agonizing over the problem? It's all right, lied Kathy, deciding to herself. What should she do to get away from John? Or be good and listen? After all, nothing bad is being offered to her. At least not yet. However, the girl's freedom-loving nature rebelled against such arbitrariness. What's the matter with her? She is not a thing to be decided for her when she leaves and how she gets home. This is her life. At 3:30 p.m., barely after class ended, she walked quietly outside. With a mental giggle, she fooled the intrusive bodyguard. What are you doing out early? A voice came over her ear. Kathy nearly jumped and turned around abruptly. 2 paces away from her, grinning, stood John. That's where he'd come from, out of the ground or something. Without a word, the driver grabbed her firmly by the elbow and led her toward the car. Kathy jerked once, twice in vain. It was as if she had her arm in a trap. I'll scream, she warned. John smirked. Well, scream. Just look here first. John's hand dived into his pocket. Kathy involuntarily glanced at what he was now holding out to her. It was an FBI ID card. Fake for some reason. The girl clarified. You insult. John sighed. We got the real thing. So are we going to scream or go home? Kathy smiled involuntarily. The man was speaking in the most amicable tone and was not suggesting anything criminal. Let's go home. She gave in. It took John a few minutes to get her home. And when she got out, he started unloading the company bags from the trunk of the car without any explanation. He followed the astonished Kathy. The girl thought about not letting him into the apartment, but immediately realized the futility of the idea herself. John took off his shoes in the hallway and made his way to the kitchen. Kathy was suddenly ashamed of the squalor of her surroundings. However, the man remained silent, deliberately shoving food into the refrigerator. Why shouldn't he? Weakly protested the girl. This is not my initiative. Michael told me to provide the groceries. Calmly answered John. I'll stop by tomorrow morning and put on my shoes again. He finally disappeared behind the door. Kathy sat down on a stool, staring at the refrigerator. Then she took out her cell phone and typed in the internet search bar. Michael. A strong-willed, confident face stared back at her. There wasn't much information, but it was becoming clear. Here he was, the master of the city, able to buy whatever the soul desires, and you can't buy me. Kathy showed her tongue at Michael's picture. After thinking about it, she got up and opened the fridge to throw everything out. But the idea struck her as childish, and it smelled of all this splendor. After thinking about it for a minute, she thought it over. Kathy resolutely began to prepare herself a regal treat. It went on like that for a week. John drove her to the institute and brought her back, periodically restocking. One day, when Kathy returned home, she found that the leaky faucet had been replaced and that the tiny bathroom had a brand new toilet. The girl gasped with indignation, and in the morning she told John everything. He listened nonchalantly, then stopped the car and turned to her. Kathy squirmed in her seat, expecting anything. Kathy, peacefully, John began. Understand a simple thing. A very powerful man likes you, who knows what he wants and is used to getting his way. Believe me, 1,000 young girls would come running at the snap of a finger. But now he's acting like I've never seen him act before. I don't know why, but you got him booked. So take some friendly advice, don't stall, and accept gifts with gusto. And someone asked me if I was angry. Kathy, without even noticing that John switched to you. I have a fiancé. By the way, he'll be back from the army soon. And we'll get married. And you'll live in such poverty. John shook his head. Do you think your Ethan could get a job in town if Michael didn't want one? Did everyone find out? Yes. Kathy clenched her fists. John nodded seriously. Of course he did. Kathy opened her mouth and closed it. There was essentially nothing to say. Kathy, he's not a bad man, John added quietly. Not a saint, of course. There are no saints where there is a lot of money. But he is fair and extremely lonely. He lost his wife about 10 years ago. Since then, no serious relationship. So, girls for the night. When she realized that if she wanted it, the same fate could have been waiting for her. What happened to his wife? She asked, not knowing why she was being curious. She died. Cancer could not be saved. John answered briefly. No money helped. Since then, he withdrew and went into business. No children. Lives only for himself. I had nothing to do with it, pleaded Kathy. I'd live quietly and go on living. I didn't ask to be rescued. Silly. With a condescending tone of an older brother, answered John. You have no idea. Who were those bastards that came up to you? Real bandits. And no morals. Believe me, without our intervention, it could have ended very, very badly. Does your Michael save everyone in distress? Kathy snarled. Did she really have nothing to say? No, of course not. But I do know that he paid attention to you from the first minute. He kept looking in your direction. Maybe not at me. Kathy tried to resist. Molly is much prettier, and you don't have any doubts about you at all. Smiled John. You really stood out from the girls. It was awkward for you. You tried to pull your dress up all the time. And you have the most extraordinary eyes imaginable. Kathy blushed at this unexpected confession. She was still very uncomfortable. The most improbable plans were running through her head. How to get rid of this Michael's attention. Let's go. Peacefully, John suggested. Kathy nodded. Getting up for tomorrow. Don't plan anything, he added. Are you invited to the theater? The dress is ready. No refusal accepted. Now Kathy erupted in indignation. She is not a toy. John shook his head. Read about The Taming of the Shrew. Kathy nodded against her will. That's the name of the play. John grinned. Our Michael is a man with a sense of humor. I'm sure you'll appreciate it. Left alone at last, Kathy collapsed on the bed. What to do? Leave town. Write Ethan to the police. One was foolisher than the other, so she did the womanly thing. She cried, then washed her face, and tried on the dress John had left her. The outfit was made to measure and suited her incredibly well. Kathy was transformed. Now she could be mistaken for a real movie star, and even at the Academy Awards. And here I will go to the theater herself, announced Kathy, sparkling eyes, and talk, at last, with Michael. Let him know that not everything is bought and sold in this life. The next evening, extremely determined, insanely beautiful in an evening dress with a purse and heels, Kathy was waiting for John. Opening the front door of the car, he even whistled in admiration. It was nice, though she didn't admit it to herself. All the way, the girl's heart was pounding in anticipation of meeting the unknown Michael. Even if he was all tough, he had no right to be. Here was the problem, which has no right to protect and woo. And very nicely. Send flowers and groceries should have been refused at once. And to set the record straight. Besides, Kathy caught herself thinking that such attention was even flattering. All right, today would be settled. She would explain to the man that she had a fiancé, that she was responsible for her own life. So Michael wouldn't really kill her for refusing. At that moment, the car stopped. The door swung open. The magical scent of expensive toilet water enveloped her. And someone reached out to help her out for a moment. And she found herself face to face with the very Michael. A conversation I just rehearsed. Good evening, Kathy. You're charming, I dare say. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. His voice was warm and velvety, her hand. He still held it in his. Kathy looked at Michael in silence. Words wouldn't come out of her mouth in his presence. She felt practically genosed. In fact, the owner of the city was not at all like the picture on the internet. Taller, though prone to corpulence. His muscularity, however, was evident even under a well-tailored suit, apparently not always. Michael was an entrepreneur. Now the two stood looking at each other, as if assessing an opponent in a duel. Thinking that his guest was embarrassed and frightened, Michael spoke again. Do I really scare you that much? I do not understand. All the harsh words she coined evaporated. He was overwhelming her with his willpower of self-confidence. And now Kathy was really trembling like a schoolgirl in front of the headmaster. Why you? Why me? Michael smiled. His cold, haughty face immediately transformed in the most incredible way. It was almost beautiful now, charming. Undoubtedly. Michael threw up his hands. I liked you in the restaurant. You didn't know how much you looked out of place, despite the dress, which you were a little embarrassed about. You also desperately didn't want to be in that restaurant. You don't go to places like that very often. Kathy nodded. Feeling like a rabbit in front of a boa constrictor. Did you interest me? And of course, I could not allow you to be offended in my restaurant. Softly continued Michael. In yours, Kathy cocked her head, determined to go on the offensive. Everything here is yours. So you decided. You don't have to say anything unnecessary. Michael made a cautionary gesture with his hand. Yes, as it happens, I control a lot of things in this city. And I own a lot of things. But that doesn't mean I'm trying to buy your attention or pressure you. An invitation to the theater is an occasion for personal acquaintance. You like Shakespeare, don't you? I am, aren't you? Kathy asked with a challenge. Michael shrugged his shoulders. And I, too, at one time read the complete works. I've seen many productions in the original at different famous theaters, and not only at home. If you want, you can arrange an exam. He smiled, looking at the ajar mouth. She believed him. So confident did his voice sound. The staging turned out great. Kathy laughed to tears at the witty lines. She finally managed to relax and get into the fabulous world of theater. What's more, watching from the VIP box was far more enjoyable than watching from behind the heads of the other guests. They were served champagne, fruit, and candy. The girl enjoyed the feeling of comfort, Michael's remarks, which were always to the point and extremely graceful. Yes, she was enjoying herself very much. Now all the negativity she had felt all this week was gone, and she was her cheerful, open, and trusting self again. They watched the play in one breath as the performers took the stage. To the applause of the audience, they received sumptuous bouquets, glancing sideways at Michael. Kathy understood these signs of attention to be more from him. Something made her feel very happy, as if she received the flowers herself, as if her thoughts were read in the box, and the bouquet was brought to her. "This is for you, Kathy, for a wonderful evening you have given me. Believe me, I have not rested so long," said Michael, before she could object. Leaning in, he kissed her hand respectfully. Kathy flashed. The thought was in her head. What would happen next? He was bound to ask for a sequel now. Wrong again, because Michael took her to her car and thanked her once more. "How he didn't eat you." He chuckled good-naturedly. "John." Kathy shook her head absently, looking out the window. Yes, she was expecting something else, something more terribly intrusive. And Michael turned out to be a normal man. He turned out to be educated, courteous, and not at all like the fool she'd imagined him to be. And she felt very calm and good around him. Kathy forbade herself to think about it. She went to the theater once, and that was it. Next time, she would tell him everything. "So you are sure there will be a next time?" she asked herself. John watched her through the mirror, did not pester her with questions, apparently understanding the emotional turmoil of the girl. Once home, Kathy regretfully changed her clothes, realizing she hadn't asked how to return the dress. On reflection, she decided that for such a question she would simply be laughed at. Unable to find her place, she decided to call Ethan. The conversation left a strange residue. Ethan seemed to her somehow embittered. He spoke reluctantly. He didn't ask her how she was doing. She had longed for sweet words, proof of his love. Kathy hung up the phone and burst into tears. Why was it so? Why was Ethan withdrawn into himself now, when she so needed his help? And what if this misunderstanding continued to arise after the wedding? Had she been hasty in her decision to marry this handsome, but at times incomprehensible guy, and he hadn't offered her anything of the sort? And then the cell phone rang again. Kathy grabbed the phone, certain that it was Ethan who had realized that he had offended her by his neglect and was now calling back. The number, however, was unfamiliar. She accepted the video. The call was Michael looking at her. Kathy flinched, almost dropping the receiver. "I'm sorry. I thought you seemed sad for some reason right now, so I thought I'd make sure everything was all right. I guess my intuition was right," he said in a sad tone. Kathy was silent, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Kathy, do you like motorcycles?" Michael asked. The question was so unexpected that she nodded. "Then change into jeans and a jacket and come downstairs," said her companion in a tone that could not tolerate objections, and passed out. There she thought again, Kathy. But she was curious as to what he was up to, and she always had time to cry. She got dressed quickly and went downstairs to look around. At the end of the street came the sound of the soft grunt of a powerful engine, and it was coming closer. And a minute later, a motorcyclist in machinery pulled in nearby. Kathy couldn't make it out, but it was definitely something very, very powerful. Michael, and it certainly was. He lifted the glass on his helmet and slipped Kathy a second seat in his hands. She put the helmet on, buckled the strap, settled in, put her arm around the motorcyclist's waist, and they were off. Kathy felt horror at first, which was immediately replaced by excitement at the speed of the reliable machine and something else that made her heart skip a beat. They raced through the city, passing the occasional car, out of the city and onward. So the asphalt merged into one solid line. Kathy shouted something. Michael answered her with the same joyful shrieks, and they must have looked like two crazy people who had decided to end their lives this way. But it was just the opposite. She had never felt so alive. She also wished that the flight had never ended, that the asphalt had changed to a bumpy road, and the driver had slowed down, and then the bike took them to the river, wide and unhurried. Michael shut off the engine, put his foot down, giving Kathy a chance to get off, and they sat together for a long time, lining his jacket and being silent. All words seemed superfluous. There was only the sky, the river, and them pensive. Not long ago, they knew nothing of each other. Feeling Kathy begin to freeze, Michael put his arm around her, warming her with his warmth. She didn't pull away, just froze, listening to her own sensations. Half an hour later, reluctantly removing her hand, Michael rose and held out his hand to her, rising from his jacket, and there was flight again. Only now there was something else, something vaguely warm, mixed in with the excitement. "Now I see it's all right," Michael told her. "Don't cry again, or I won't be able to sleep." And then he got on his great bike and rode away. And Kathy stood there for another minute, looking after him. And it was the same scary Michael without bodyguards in jeans and a shirt. He was the one she'd hugged recently, hiding from the wind behind his broad back. "I am the traitor," Kathy said sadly to herself as she walked up the stairs, because Ethan certainly can't be told about this. At home, she picked up the picture where she and Ethan stood, embraced, happily in love. When he left for the army, Kathy printed out the photo and framed it. It made her feel better that way. She even talked to Ethan while referring to this portrait. What had happened to them? Why had he changed so much, grown so cold? Of course, the army isn't a sports camp. It's a lot of work. But why didn't he want to understand that it was hard for her too, and very lonely without him? At these thoughts, she fell asleep and dreamt. The highway running under the wheels, the wind and the river, taking away all the sorrows. In the morning, John asked no questions, just a hum, appreciating her rested look and shining eyes. In the evening, he picked her up and on the road. They chatted for a while. Nothing major. Weather, politics, favorite movies. Kathy caught herself thinking she was beginning to get used to her driver and bodyguard. When questioned by the girls who noticed the same car coming to pick her up, she didn't answer. Only Molly seemed to understand what was going on and was clearly jealous. What Kathy didn't have time to party anyway. She started studying for her exams. She was also waiting for Michael's next move. It happened at another premiere, where they went with him. The play was, as they call it, for a select few. The production was in Russian and in some places. Seeing that the companion was straining her memory, Michael translated the remarks of the characters into her ear. There was nothing ostentatious about it, and Kathy quickly stopped being embarrassed. And at intermission, he took her hand in his and said to Kathy, "I ask you to be my wife." The girl was surprised, opening and closing her mouth. So unexpected was everything that was happening. Seeing her bewilderment, Michael grinned. It was probably supposed to be different. A candlelit evening, flowers, a champagne ring, and me crouching down on one knee. Kathy shook her head, pulling her thoughts together. "I don't like looking ridiculous," Michael continued. "And my knee doesn't bend well. There's a prosthetic as a reminder of the past. So I thought I'd just ask you if you'd like to be with me. I'm old enough to be your father, and I understand that. However, I can promise you that I can make you happy." Kathy shook her head. The phrase was difficult for her. "I can't. I'm waiting for my fiancé from the army. He proposed to you, and you said yes. You are engaged to be married." Michael asked quickly. Kathy didn't lie. Indeed, they hadn't made plans for the future. She was the one who decided for the two of them that it would be this way and not that way. And Ethan is getting out of touch less and less often, and is making general comments. And in general, he behaves extremely strangely. If she tries to ask questions, he just shuts down. What if he's got another girl there? So I have a chance to interpret her silence correctly, Michael summed up. And believe me, I'm going to take it. Ethan dear, talk to me. Explain to me what's going on. Kathy pleaded, hypnotizing the phone over and over again. But the cell phone was silent, and conversations were becoming more and more rare. And they talked about practically nothing. In utter despair, the girl even called Ethan's mother. He had left her this number just in case. But even this extreme measure did not bring clarity. Kathy, I do not understand anything either. Wendy cried into the phone. It was as if the boy had been replaced. He used to be so kind and affectionate, and now he's just making generalities. He hangs up on me at the drop of a hat. Time passed. John was still driving her and taking her home from the institute, periodically restocking the groceries in the fridge. Ethan stopped writing altogether, didn't answer the phone. A month passed, a second, another time, calling her fiance's mother, as she was used to counting. Kathy heard that Ethan had decided to stay under contract. Wendy was sobbing so much that Kathy could barely manage to calm her down. After looking at the picture of her and Ethan, she took it out of the frame and put it in her scrapbook. Life went on, and it was her life, which she wouldn't let anyone break, especially since she certainly didn't feel abandoned now. Michael continued his courtship, and he did it unobtrusively, trying to please her with pleasant little things. Twice they had gone for a night flight on a motorcycle. Kathy listened carefully to Michael and found his big face not so repulsive. In addition, more than once or twice, she noticed the envy in the women's eyes. The ladies didn't understand how this girl could pull off such a substantial sum. Michael himself became interested in some provincial girl. They appeared together more and more often, visiting exhibitions, theaters, fashionable movie premieres. Kathy began to get used to this life, which before only saw in the movies. It was easy and reliable next to this closed-in a man with tremendous power, but never once did Kathy use that power over her. And then came the evening when John drove them, not to Kathy's house after the theater, but to a luxurious mansion in an upscale part of town. Looking at the likes of him, Kathy always wondered, how much could such a house cost? I invite you to my place for a cup of coffee, Michael answered her dumb question. I won't hide it. Yes, I'm looking forward to continuing the evening. But it's up to you. If you don't want to stay, John will take you home. However, I do ask you to take a look at my bachelor pad. Inside, it turned out to be a dream house. It was elaborate. It didn't feel museum-like or pretentious. It was really a dwelling designed for its inhabitants to enjoy life. Kathy was particularly enthralled by the fireplace, already melted, filling the house with warmth. Michael followed her gaze and nodded to the chair in front of the fireplace. Kathy snuggled with pleasure, stretching her legs toward the fire. Michael brought coffee, fruit, and sweets, sat down on the fluffy carpeted floor, and carefully removed the girl's shoes. What are you doing? She was surprised, but he nonchalantly began to massage her feet. Kathy, she purred. Pleasure filled her whole being, a real bliss. She longed for Michael to continue her body. For so long, having not known a man's hands, she trembled with latent desire. It will be just the way you want it. Quietly, he said, without interrupting his occupation. I want you very much, you know that. But I will stop. If you say no, yes. Quietly, Kathy said. Everything that happened then surpassed her most secret dreams. Michael knew how to be passionate and gentle. Kathy. Quietly, he said quietly, looking into her eyes glowing with the pleasure he had experienced. I will repeat my proposal to you, marry me. You see that we are a perfect match. And she said yes again. What followed was like a fairy tale. They could have been married on the same day. So pervasive was Michael's influence in this town. But Kathy requested at least a week to prepare. She wasn't going to throw a party, knowing that the girls would be jealous, which was the last thing she wanted. She just wanted to gather her thoughts, say goodbye to her old life, visit her parents, after all. When her mother heard the news, she burst out her hands, her daughter. How could it be? He's a gangster. Everyone knows that. Mom, it's all nonsense. If he's rich, he's a bandit. Kathy reassured her. Her father, usually not much of a talker, only asked if you wouldn't regret it later. I don't know. Dad, Kathy admitted honestly. He does everything for me, protects me like a treasure. But does he? Didn't my father give up? Kathy was quiet. It was a word they never said in conversation. What about Ethan? His mother couldn't stand not writing or calling. Kathy admitted honestly. The parents looked at each other and sighed. Okay, daughter, you're a grown-up. You have your own head on your shoulders past the verdict of her father. No advice will not help. There is only one. Use your head and your heart. Listen. Kathy returned to town with mixed feelings. Some doubt continued to grind at her from within. But she shook it off, deciding it was normal. Things would get better. Her husband would cherish and nurture it. And Ethan. What could she do? She wasn't the first one to get dumped after all. The day of the celebration came so quickly that she didn't even realize it was happening. Just yesterday, she was sitting in her classes, taking her credits, and now she was standing in front of the mirror in a veil and snow-white dress, looking like a fairy princess. She looked in the mirror and saw a future life of beauty and security. Michael loves her, and he's not that much older. If you break it down, it's even better to treat her like her favorite girl, to spoil her, to carry her in his arms. And he looks good-looking. Women still look at him. So the messages and calls were pouring in like a cornucopia. Kathy had no idea she had so many friends and acquaintances eager to congratulate her on the occasion. When she had been a poor, humble Kathy girl, there had been far fewer. Kathy was about to turn off her cell phone when suddenly her gaze fell upon a message that appeared on the screen. It was Ethan's mother. Her heart fluttered for some reason, and she read it to Kathy. Ethan is hurt. He is dying without knowing what he is doing. Kathy dialed the number. What is it? Where is he? Sobbing in his voice. The woman told him that her son had stayed for contract service after the army. He wanted to earn money for an apartment to provide him and Kathy with a comfortable life. He had to serve in a hot spot, so he couldn't call or write from there. Besides, the guy didn't want to worry his family. And now the scariest thing happened. Kathy stared at the phone for a long time, and then, totally unaware of what she was doing, pulled off her wedding dress, threw her veil on the chair, changed into jeans and a sweater, grabbed her purse, and headed for the exit. All the rest was like a dream. She realized she was already on the train. She didn't even remember how she bought the ticket, what she said. The phone was left there next to the veil, which she never got a chance to try on. Along with them, she left all her past life. Already aware that there would be no way back, she walked swiftly down the white hospital corridor, looking at the room numbers. It seemed that she had to get here alive. And there she would manage. She would get him out, even from the other side of the world. She'll be there day and night. And then he'll get better. He'll definitely get better, and everything will be fine. He will understand, forgive. And maybe he did not need to know about her affair with Michael. She thought that Ethan had left her, so she got confused. She got carried away. It didn't matter now, as long as he lived. Seeing the right number, Kathy opened the door of the room and immediately slammed it shut. A slim nurse in a white coat was leaning over the hospital bed to see a picture of the most intimate nature. She was standing with her back to her, but Kathy realized that she was kissing the man lying on the bed. She looked again at the room number. It was correct. The girl looked into the room again. Excuse me, I was told Ethan was in this room. The nurse straightened sharply and walked past her with an independent look, and an astonished voice came from the bed. Kathy, why are you here? Kathy leaned against the wall, feeling her strength leave her. You're alive, your mother called. She said you were dying. This is a mistake. The other fighter, the namesake, was seriously wounded. I took a bullet too, but I got off easy. I'm getting better. Ethan's voice sounded guilty. He hid his eyes. I see you're getting better. Ethan turned away, remained silent, and then turned to attack. Are you judging the nurse? Not you. But she followed me around like a baby. Maybe that's why I got better. What did you think men were monks at war? We walk on the edge every day, while you're out there enjoying your lives as civilians. You're no saint yourself, I'm sure, for hiding your eyes. Cheated on me. Kathy was staring at him with her eyes wide open. It was a different Ethan, completely unfamiliar, embittered, unpleasant. Yes, she answered. I was cheating on you. I was even going to get married today. And then she turned and ran away, swallowing tears and resentment and disappointment. The door slammed behind her, cutting off another possibility of her fate never coming true. Kathy returned to the train station and sat down on a bench, looking straight ahead. There was not a single thought in her mind. She could not go back. She was painfully ashamed of Michael, whom she had abandoned on her wedding day. Just like that, without an explanation to her parents. They would welcome her, of course, but they would pity her and lecture her. And she's bad enough as it is. Little girl, give me a loaf of bread. A quiet voice came over her. At her looked an old woman with eyes washed clean by time, and tear-washed eyes. She was a young, healthy woman, well enough to be in good health. She is young and healthy, and she will somehow get her life back on track. And who will help her? Kathy, without looking, put her hand into her purse and pulled out some bills. She handed them to the old woman. Take it. Grandmother, be well, and God give you health, good soul, and a good affectionate husband, said the old woman. She could not stand it and burst into tears. The grandmother sat down beside her and began to stroke the weeping girl on the head, saying something comforting. Weep, weep through your tears, your heart is cleansed. You won't believe me now, but your happiness is near. You'll find it, don't doubt it. Fate will give you a sign soon. Don't miss it, look. Kathy cried, not listening to the words. She did not even notice that the old woman got up and walked away. And when she looked up, she was gone. Kathy, what are you doing here? It sounded in my ear. She looked up. Betty, where are you from? Come to see your aunt. She laughed. They had only studied together for a year. Then the cheerful, mischievous girl, who'd come all the way from Dakota to get an education, decided that years of sitting behind books wasn't for her. So she got married in no time. They hadn't seen each other since, but she recognized her immediately. She was still the same perky, laughing girl, but she'd grown prettier and obviously didn't need the money. Now she was looking at Kathy with the same attentive eyes. You've been crying. Tell me what happened. In an implacable tone, Betty said. She was evidently used to being bossy. Kathy decided to tell her former classmate the whole story. You're really something, Betty said. Like in the movies, I thought it only happens in books. Why don't you go back to your Michael? Maybe he'll forgive you. Ashamed, Kathy admitted. And then, remembering how cold Michael's eyes sometimes became, how resolute he was in business, she lowered her head. No, he would not. So she was ready to go. Betty squinted. Even the Dakotas. Kathy glanced at her to see if she was joking, but she looked dead serious. What in your line of work? I don't have a job. You'll be a housemaid. My husband and I have our own hotel with a good reputation. Business is good. I'll provide the lodging, food from the restaurant. Make up your mind. You go. I'm going, said Kathy. Events were unfolding very quickly. And now she really did not care where to go, as long as it was far away from the two men who she thought loved her and whom she loved. Kathy, who had grown up in a provincial town and then plunged headlong into the hustle and bustle and crazy rhythm of the metropolis. And she had forgotten how benevolent relations between people could be and how unhurried the way of life was. Of course, she was very worried about how she would be received, how she would settle in a new place. It turned out that all her fears were unfounded. Charles, Betty's husband, a big red-cheeked man with a bass and thunderous laughter, hugged the girl from the doorstep and said, "Welcome to the North. No one will hurt you here. If they even look at you funny, You let me know, and I'll sort it out in a jiffy. She was given a much larger room than her old one, with everything she needed, and hotel staff. She got to know each other quickly. The duties proved to be uncomplicated, and the guests adequate. She also somehow immediately took a liking to Betty Clara's mother, who lived with them. In a separate annex, however, she was not an old woman. Loved books. Immediately began to invite a guest to her house for tea, to chat about novelties, discuss movies, and talk in general about life. Slowly, her worries subsided, and Kathy informed her parents from her new phone that she was doing well. Strictly forbidden to give out the number to anyone with the help of Charles, who raised his connections. She even managed to take an academic leave of absence from the institute, and that made her happy. Still, she hoped to finish her education, but that was for later. For now, she just had to live, study, smile, not to berate herself all the time. Still, she had enough work to keep her mind off of bad things. Besides, Betty and Charles didn't leave her alone, inviting her to visit, taking her on picnics in the next town for shopping. After a month, Kathy felt as if she had known all these wonderful people for a long time. And the work was not burdensome. It even pleased her. "Wait, Kathy, we'll find you another guy like that," Charles joked. And Betty shooed him away. "What's the big deal? Let the girl forget how she ran away from the wedding and lost 2 men at once." Kathy guffawed, realizing he genuinely cared about her. Charles's character was simple. It is difficult for a woman alone, so it is necessary to help acquaint the guests, for the most part of the same simple men pretty blue-eyed maid really liked. But they did not molest her, did not lay hands on her, as if she bore some trace of former resentment, disappointment, forbidding rapprochement. Or maybe Charles did his best. Talk to them. The contingent here was constant. The same people came every year, so the locals already knew what to expect and from whom. "Charles, I've never met anyone like you before, and I don't want any worse," Kathy said with a smile. Charles squared his already broad shoulders and looked triumphantly at his wife. "Did you see that one? Maybe you got the low." Betty, barely reaching her husband's shoulder, she stood up on her toes, ruffling his hair and kissing him soundly. Looking at them, Kathy was a little jealous. What a couple they were. How happy and easy to live. Not that she was jinxed after all. It's true what they say, you shouldn't complain about fate. Things can get much worse. This Kathy realized one far from beautiful. In the morning, feeling a sharp attack of nausea. Why would that be? She asked herself. The food in the restaurant was always of high quality. Even to offend the majestic cook with suspicion seemed to her a matter of utter impossibility. And then a sudden thought made her, clasping her mouth with the palm of her hand. It couldn't be. Or maybe she flashed back to the details of the one night she'd spent in bed with Michael. It had happened so suddenly, but he'd been so careful, so gentle. Could it have been a mistake? The next morning, however, it happened again. Seeing Kathy pale as chalk, Betty took her aside and asked, in her forehead, what was going on. Kathy made no secret of her misgivings. And Betty said loudly, "You're a lucky girl. Mother, go to the hospital. Let them take a look at you." The gynecologist confirmed definitively and irrevocably. Kathy was pregnant. I asked her straight out for an abortion, or are you going to have the baby? Instead of Kathy, Betty answered, and she even went with her into the doctor's office. This is usually not welcome, but she felt too bad, girl. Besides, everyone in town seemed to know each other. We're going to have a baby. Give her something to keep her from throwing up. Vitamins or something. And then we'll figure it out. We can't raise the baby, can we? My mother helped raise two. Now she's talking about a third. She's talking about a third. Come on, Kathy, provide her with a baby, or she'll be all over us with her bubbly energy. She already had two boys running around, looking like each other, and their father like two drops of water. They were already strong, mischievous, and very friendly. Their parents were incredibly proud of them. and everyone who worked at the inn spoiled them at every opportunity. Kathy, too, used to slip them sweets and often admired the boys, thinking that one day her son and daughter would be just as merry running around, poking their curious noses everywhere, and not be afraid of anything. Now the life of the very one was at stake, so many times imagined in her fantasies, and Kathy made up her mind, repeating after Betty, "I'm going to have the baby. I will." It seemed, after the difficult decision had been made, fate took pity on Kathy. The toxicosis stopped as suddenly as it had begun, and apparently, not without the intervention of the hostess surrounded Kathy with care. She was not allowed to pick up heavy rest time. Her diet increased dramatically. The amount of fruits and vegetables increased dramatically. She was encouraged, joked good-naturedly, at the gradually rounding tummy. Soon the third strongman would be born, they said. And Kathy herself began to think that she had lived her entire life with these friendly, real people, simple, but ready to help at any moment. And even the birth went easily, without any complications. Kathy smiled at him and whispered, "Hello, David. Don't worry, Mom will always be there for you, and together we'll totally manage." Truly, my happiness. The baby looked at her with his eyes as blue as his mother's, and suddenly mumbled, as if to confirm her words. The man gave his word. The big, pink-cheeked midwife, like almost all the locals, willingly supported him, and she carried the baby away, letting the mother come to her senses. Kathy was smiling in the room too, feeling incredibly calm and confident that everything was going to be okay. At home she was welcomed, cheerfully treated to a real celebration. She had long since moved into one of the cozy cottages built by the hard-working Charles over the course of the year. He had long dreamed of enlarging the business, and just now he was considering an offer to join a major hotel chain as a partner. Kathy, too, was not forgotten. At a family meeting it was decided that, having recovered from the birth, she will take the place of the administrator. Education allows the work she knows. She wouldn't always have to be a maid. The days passed, filled with joy and happiness. The baby turned out to be quiet. He ate well, didn't annoy her, let his mother sleep at night by crying, so she had time to go to work for a few hours, to receive guests, the flow of which did not stop regardless of the season. Of course, her friends didn't charge her a penny for her lodging, but Kathy insisted on paying and was very proud of her independence. One day, Charles said in all seriousness to Kathy, "You bring us luck, no less. Things are going so well that I'm afraid to jinx it. Sometimes it seems that men come to us just to see your blue eyes." Kathy laughed. But there was truth in the joke. Men of all ages were looking at her. More than once she received an invitation to spend the evening in a restaurant. Twice she immediately offered her hand and heart. She politely declined, citing the need to take care of her son. It wasn't that she was giving up on herself. No, just too alive. There was still the memory of double loss and double betrayal. That was how she was sure she had betrayed Michael without ever explaining to him what had happened and for whom she had stabbed him in the heart like that. For the guy who had traded their love for the first girl who had shown him signs of affection. Yet in time, Kathy forgave Ethan by becoming a mother. She had changed inside, more empathetic and capable of forgiveness. The boy was wounded, didn't know if he would survive. And that nurse was there for him. She supported him, surrounded him with warmth, protected him. Should he be blamed for his weakness? And only one person. Kathy did not forgive herself. She understood how unfairly she had treated Michael, what pain she had caused him. If she had had her old phone, she surely would have tried to explain herself. But fate itself had decided otherwise. But she never stopped dreaming about him. She especially kept dreaming about the time the two of them had been riding together on the motorcycle, and she'd been sheltering from the wind behind Michael's broad back. She even woke up to the smell of the leather jacket, and with tear tracks on her cheeks. "We should get the guest house ready to heat the bathhouse," Charles announced in the morning. "You girls take charge of the place. I'll meet the guests." "What's that? An inspector coming to see us?" Betty giggled. "Take it up a notch," said Charles. "It looks like the king himself is coming to check up on us." "What happened?" Betty asked. Charles spat over his left shoulder 3 times, so as not to jinx it. "It looks like it, or he wouldn't have gone himself." "All right. Girls, make sure everything's top-notch. We'll be there soon." Kathy was transmitted by the spouse's joy. They had been talking about the merger for a long time, with great hopes and great prospects. As she understood from the conversations, the intended partner already had an established hotel business. Now he was interested in the outlying regions. The emphasis was on ecology, closeness to nature. The inhabitants of the capital, tired of the smog and the eternal rush, could have a rest here with pleasure. And the man, according to Charles, turned out to be decent. He could have just raked it under himself, but no. He called him partners, listened to what Charles had to say. So he already liked him absent-mindedly. She didn't ask him who he was, though. Betty didn't seem to know either. Sensible. In general, Charles still adhered to the rule that women should not be involved in purely male affairs, leaving David in the care of Slag. Kathy was eager to get ready for the meeting, and when the black car pulled up to the house, escorted by Charles's Jeep, she already had everything ready for one thing. She certainly wasn't ready for Michael to get out of the car. Kathy fidgeted, looking for a place to hide. Her heart was pounding like crazy. It couldn't be. He wasn't like that. And yet it was him thinning, but definitely him. Kathy ran to Slaga's outhouse, opened the door, and rushed to the bewildered woman. "Sarah, help me. I need to leave now immediately." "What's the matter?" Betty's mother stroked her shoulders, trying to comfort her. Through her tears, Kathy told her what had happened. Choking on her tears, "Stop it immediately," she ordered. Normally soft and good-natured woman. And Kathy fell silent. "I believe that this is a sign from above," announced Slaga. "You need to talk. Besides, he must know that he has become a father. You have no right to keep it from him." Kathy looked at her with wide eyes. Slaga smiled sadly. "What are you looking at? You think you'll always take it out yourself. Believe me, loneliness is a curse. I know that. And a son without a father to grow up will be bitter. Ask your heart. You have the right to decide for all 3. The woman continued. And Kathy trembled. "What shall I do?" Pathetically, she asked. "Wait till the men have finished their business," Slaga advised. "The guest will not immediately get herself back together. You know, Charles will not let him go without a bath and refreshments. And then you have to seize the moment, and don't be afraid. Otherwise, you'll blame yourself all your life." They were not allowed to finish. There was a gentle knock on the door. Kathy knocked pleadingly. She looked at her landlady. She nodded. "Sit down. I'll take care of this myself," and went out. Kathy listened to the voices, squirming in her chair, and then the door opened again, and John came in with a protesting Slaga in his arms. He didn't change a bit, and the same elusive smile played across his face. "Hello, Kathy," he said, carefully setting the lady of the house on the floor. She shifted her gaze from one to the other, trying to come to her senses from the unexpected behavior of the uninvited guest. "Hello, John." Kathy raised her weeping eyes to him and quietly asked Michael if he knew I was here. "No," to her surprise, John answered and leaned over to kiss the hand of the dazed Clara. "Forgive my methods. I know Kathy well enough and her ability to slip away. Don't worry, my dear, no one wishes her harm. On the contrary." "What about it?" Kathy began, and then fell silent. She remembered the little book John had once seen with 3 letters in it. There were no X's in that office. It's hard to imagine the connections Michael's driver and bodyguard had. "You want to ask why we're here?" John guessed. "Michael is making a deal that benefits both parties. Of course, I had to direct him a little bit to find a partner. But it's actually a great decision. Now you have to take yours and take your word for it. I won't let you hurt my friend's heart again." John's face turned cold and serious. This was the first time Kathy had seen him like this. "So you have 2 choices. If you say it's all over between you and I have been looking for you for nothing, I won't say anything to Michael and we'll go away. Really, you'll have to move too, so you won't cross paths by accident from now on. I promise I'll help with that too. If you love him, then go and tell him so. Otherwise, you'll be the biggest fool in the world. And I've seen a lot of them. Kathy covered her eyes with her hands. How could it be? She had already reconciled herself, believed that she would live for her son. And now fate had changed again. John had found her. He was not worried about his master, but about an old friend, and he was worried about her. She felt it perfectly. And then there was a crying sound behind the wall. John raised his eyebrows in amazement and looked at Kathy demandingly. I have to go. David is awake, she explained, and went to her son. David is what? What do you mean? Confused, John repeated. He did not know about the child. It turns out that even the offices are failing. Closing the door, Kathy heard Slag's voice. Sit down at last. My tea is hot. I'll tell you what I know, just promise not to grab me like that again, because it was nice. Calmly answered John, to whom the former mood seemed to return. Kathy fed her son, rocking him in her arms. One part of her dreamed of hiding. The other was mentally flying there to Michael. Once again, fate intervened in the course of events. The bell rang and the cheerful voice of Charles ordered Kathy, come over, I'll introduce you to a wonderful man. The girl opened the door with as much difficulty as if she weighed a ton, if it were not for the pacing next to her. John, she would probably have fainted from the excitement of the voice. Silent, and several pairs of eyes stared at her. And this is Kathy, our friend and wonderful administrator, Charles began, and then stuttered at the sight of Michael rising slowly from his desk. Michael was silent and looked at Kathy. She had the strength not to look away. The pause was dragging on. What is going on, people? In came in again. Charles, do you two know each other? Do they know each other? John answered. They really needed to talk privately now. Left alone with Michael, Kathy became even more nervous. What could she say to the man she had ruthlessly abandoned, betrayed? And yet she had the guts to exhale. One single word, his name was Michael. He was silent, and Kathy dared to look up. This rugged man, who had seen a lot in life, was crying down his sunken cheeks, tears flowing, and he was looking at her without looking away. And then they spoke at the same time, interrupting each other, rushing to tell each other how they had lived all this time and why they had only met now. Kathy couldn't believe her ears. He knew why and who she had run off to on her wedding day, and took it for granted. Decided he was too old for her, that life's gifts were over, and just wished her happiness. He was used to losing this master of life, who was able to build his considerable fortune not on other people's failures and not by fighting the law. He loved her so much that he let her go. And that was the most incredible thing. She talked about meeting him in the hospital, about how she regretted her own act 1,000 times, and how she decided it was her punishment for betraying him. They talked as if they had been silent for 1,000 years and had never been able to cross the line, to embrace each other. And then the door opened, and there was a cry in the silence. A hungry David, gently and awkwardly, as men do. John held him. Well, David, will you at least explain to these half-wits that it was time for them to kiss and start all over again as a threesome? When a completely dazed Michael took his son in his arms, Kathy thought the house was brighter. It was Michael's eyes that shone with genuine happiness. The wedding was celebrated here. There was an excellent restaurant and banquet hall nearby. Kathy looked absolutely stunning in white. Michael insisted on it. She cried tears of joy. A mother who had a son-in-law and a grandson at the same time. Drunken father instructed Charles, and John, the great combinator, the driver of the bodyguard, a reliable friend, sat next to Slaga, rejuvenated, slender, and very elegant. Now and then stroking her hand. Who knows? Betty said thoughtfully, looking at the picture. Maybe it won't be just a wedding. It's the Dakotas. It's a big, heartfelt affirmation from Charles. Kathy didn't hear that talk. She sat beside her husband, unable to eat or drink, but as happy and relaxed as she had been on the motorcycle, behind the strong and mighty back of the man she loved.